Almost 5 million in New York cheer the triumph of Operation Desert Storm, while in the Persian Gulf there are battles yet to be won.
This is NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw, reporting tonight from NBC News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. It was called Operation Welcome Home. Today's blizzard of confetti and cheers along New York's Lower Broadway, a 1-mile-long, 4-hour celebration for the men and women of Operation Desert Storm. There were some protesters, but for most New Yorkers, this was a long-awaited chance to cheer something. NBC's Dan Bernard tonight.
Lower Broadway, the financial district, a canyon created by money, was again a canyon of heroes. The three Grand Marshals, General Norman Schwarzkopf, Defense Secretary Dick Cheney, and a New York native, General Colin Powell, led the way to receive the cheers and begin the littering on a grand scale. Over 4.5 million spectators, tons of ticker tape and confetti rained on the marchers, more than half of whom served in the war against Iraq. No matter how dispassionate one tried to be about this parade, it is difficult not to be moved by the sight of the 24,000 marchers and the cheers that welcome them to New York.
A very special thing that these guys did for us, and I think they deserve something. I think we have some making up to do.
The rough treatment of Vietnam veterans was fresh in many minds, and a contingent of Vietnam veterans marched in this parade.
I think just with what happened with Vietnam, we need to tell everyone that we really supported them.
There were two groups of anti-war protesters, and an attempt to break through police lines to disrupt the parade. They were overwhelmed by the police and the sentiment of the crowd. There was a display of military hardware. And a few New Yorkers wondered if this jet would make it out of town before it was stolen and sold for parts. In this financially hard-pressed city, it was a parade that was privately paid for, and a surplus of at least $500,000 will go to support families of casualties of the war. But this was a celebration that so many came home alive and well. Stan Bernard, NBC News, New York.
Well, that was going on in New York today. Iran was claiming that Saddam Hussein has started a new attack on Shiite Muslims trapped in southern Iraq. One more reminder of the continuing turmoil of the Persian Gulf. NBC's John Cochran is at the White House. Now, John, what about these latest claims from Iran?
Tom, the White House says it has no evidence that Saddam Hussein has launched a new crackdown.
As the president returned from Camp David, the unconfirmed reports of fighting in southern Iraq again raised questions about what the Gulf War really accomplished. From a human standpoint, the unexpected disappointment was the suffering endured by all Iraqi rebels, especially the Kurds.
I remember Eisenhower once said that the results of every war will surprise you. Well, all the results of this war are not in yet.
But U.S. officials say the work done by GIs in setting up refugee camps has saved almost 1 million Kurds. Because of that, a White House spokesman said the president was able to enjoy Saturday's victory celebration. Today, Marlin Fitzwater said, everyone can feel very good about the prosecution of the war and the status of events at this point. But a Kurdish leader warned today that Allied forces must not leave Iraq until democracy is established. All the complications in Iraq stem from the fact that Saddam survived the Gulf War. But the White House is quick to point out that Bush never made ousting Saddam a goal of the war. And when critics complain about the lack of democracy in Kuwait, the White House again says that was never the goal. The goal was to force Saddam out of Kuwait. Meanwhile, U.S. officials urge democratic reforms and fair trials for those accused of collaborating with Iraq. On the positive side, the president feels the war ended what he calls Vietnam syndrome.
It reestablished U.S. confidence in itself, as well as amongst our allies and adversaries as well.
The war also protected access to the Gulf's vast oil reserves. Oddly enough, the White House never brags about that, even though last November, Secretary of State Baker was blunt about the need to protect Gulf oil.
If you want to sum it up in one word, it's jobs.
So far, though, President Bush has emphasized the idealism of defeating aggression instead of the practicality of protecting jobs. But a senior official here says that emphasis could change
during next year's re-election campaigns. Tom?
Thank you, John.